Well, good afternoon from Lisbon and also from Cambridge and I suppose Glasgow, right?
Yes.
And we're delighted to have you here for the first presentation of the 3 nominees of the UMAC Award. What is the UMAC Award? Most people don't know. The UMAC Award is a tool that UMAC, the Committee of ICOM for University Museums and Collections, created in 2016 to honor excellence and innovation and engagement with the community among university museums and collections all over the world. And so this year, usually we have the presentation of the UMAC Award, the winner, at our annual General Assembly, which was supposed to have happened last week in Sydney, Australia, but didn't happen because of COVID. And so we're having, like everyone, a digital program. And this week, the next, and the next, we will be presenting the 3 nominees here on YouTube. And we're delighted to have you. And for the first presentation, I'm introducing Steph Scholten, who is now in the UK. He is member of the jury of the UMAC Award, but also UMAC Vice Chair and Director of the Hunterian Museum, Glasgow University. And he will conduct the presentation with our wonderful guests. Thank you so much for being with us today. Steph?
Thank you, Marta, and good afternoon indeed from Glasgow. Welcome colleagues from Cambridge, relatively close. I mean, remarkably, we have 2 UK nominees in the selection of 3 this year. I'm particularly pleased actually to be able to host this session because I have worked in 2 museums that actually have extensive Egyptian collections, the National Museum of Antiquities in the Netherlands, as well as the University Museum, the Albert Pierson Museum in Amsterdam. And in both, we've done extensive research into our, coffins, mummies, etc., etc. So, and I realized that it's actually really hard to shape innovative projects in this field because there have been many, and you've managed to do that. So that's why you are nominated for the UMAC Award 2020. So I would invite you to tell us about your project, but maybe first introduce the team that is presenting the project. Would you do that for me, Helen?
Sure. So my name's Helen Strudwick. I'm Curator of Egyptian Antiquities at the Fitzwilliam Museum. I'm joined by my colleagues Melanie Pitkin, who's a Research Associate at the Fitzwilliam Museum and an Egyptologist, Julie Dawson, who is our Head of Conservation, former Conservator of Antiquities and a huge expert in this particular subject. And I'm also delighted that Sara, Hany, Abed has been able to join us from Egypt, actually from Alexandria, and she's a colleague who works with us there on our project too. So it's great that they are all here together.
Well, so okay, thank you very much. So I'll give you the floor to present your project. So you can start sharing your screen now.
Yeah, I hope you can see that now. So the Fitzwilliam Museum's collection of Egyptian antiquities includes an excellent cross-section of coffins from different periods of Egyptian history. And since 2014, these have been the subject of an interdisciplinary study investigating not just their decoration and texts and iconography, but also the way that they've been created and used by the ancient Egyptians. CT scanning has been often used to examine Egyptian mummies, but led by our Head of Conservation, Julie Dawson, we've pioneered its use in studying the reuse of materials in coffin construction. And these scans have enabled us, for example, to spot details that indicate where older wood has been used in new coffins, and even actually wood from older coffins themselves. The practice of reusing wood is now a well-established fact in coffins dating to very roughly 1000 BC. That's the end of the New Kingdom and the early Third Intermediate period in Egypt. But using techniques like CT scanning as well as X-radiography, we can show that reuse of materials in coffins was actually prevalent from at least 2000 BC onwards, and that it extended to at least 650 BC. This raises, of course, many questions about the Egyptian attitude to the afterlife and the extent to which coffins were actually intended to be eternal resting places for the dead, something we thought we knew. It also raises, I think, fascinating questions about the Egyptians' attitude to the reuse of funerary goods as well as other goods, and of course about the economics of death. Egyptian coffin studies, as you've indicated, are now a global phenomenon, and our research is contributing massively to the international work in this area. The project has been a collaboration, including experts from different fields within the museum, so Egyptologists like Melanie and me, and conservation colleagues like Julie Dawson, and I want to also very much highlight the work of our colleague Jenny Marchant, shown on the right here, whose sad death in June this year has hit us very hard. And we've been joined also by specialists in particular analyses of materials, historic painting techniques, ancient woodworking, as well as a consultant radiologist. But from a very early point, we have shared our research with the public in face-to-face encounters. For example, in 2016, we held a major exhibition which included a live conservation studio within the galleries. Here, visitors could actually see investigation and conservation work actually in action and talk to the researchers about the techniques they were using and the results that were actually on display in the exhibition. At the same time, we developed the idea of professional workshops for academics, curators and conservators, which we've now developed into a peer-to-peer training initiative with our colleagues in Egypt. And in addition, we've created community-focused pop-up museum experiences. And for the rest of the presentation, I really want to focus on the three aspects of our work, which are our online resource, through which we share information about our research with people around the world, the peer-to-peer training that we've been doing with colleagues in Egypt, and the pop-up museum concept, including outreach activities that we've been doing in the community with colleagues in Egypt. So our online resource. Early in the course of our research, we decided actually that a traditional written publication would not be adequate in allowing us to share the breadth of information we were gathering as part of our coffins research. Moreover, it wouldn't really allow us the flexibility of refining understanding of coffins as we further explored our collections. So we opted to create a website as a resource that could be used by colleagues and the public worldwide to find out the latest results of our studies of the coffins at the Fitzwilliam Museum. Within this resource, we provide information about individual coffins, including the people for whom they were made, how they were created and decorated, and the materials used in their creation, as well as other information. And we have begun the process now of uploading our CT scan data sets to a central repository, and we'll be making these freely available to others to explore for themselves. A number of videos are there too, for example, showing carpentry and painting techniques. There are 3D models there, a glossary of terminology and general bibliography too. And we have other news items there, for example, highlighting the presentation we delivered remotely at last year's ICOM-CIPEG meeting in Kyoto. Many of the videos that we have there include subtitles in Arabic, which we feel is really important, and the translations were provided for us by Sara Abed. Moving to look at our peer-to-peer training, our first professional workshop for academics and curators and conservators was held in Cambridge in 2016. Several of the participants were from Egypt, and one later told us that this workshop had been one of the most profound experiences of his academic life. And as a result, in June 2019, we delivered a similar workshop for our colleagues at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Over 4 days, participants had the opportunity to experience the practicalities of working with wood using replica tools, creating pigments from raw materials and mixing them with binders to create paints, and then experimenting with painting techniques using these paints applied from brushes and pens that they'd made themselves, copying originals that had been excavated in Egypt. We also had talks about Egyptian wood and its properties, and a session on digital techniques such as the creation of 3D models of objects. A crucial element of this work for us was that we wanted to enable our colleagues there to actually deliver workshops of this kind to their own colleagues at other museums in Egypt. So as part of this, in November 2019, we supported a group of them in delivering a workshop for colleagues in museums in Alexandria, hosted at the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. Again, the focus was very practical, and it also included re-examining coffins that were familiar to our colleagues within the museum there in the light of what they had learned at the workshop. Turning now to the Popup Museum. It was Melanie who introduced the idea of the Popup Museum to us at the Fitzwilliam, based on work she had done in her previous role in the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, Australia. The concept of the Popup Museum involves real researchers, that's us, Egyptologists and conservators, taking objects, including real museum objects and replicas, and hands-on activities and digital resources out into the heart of communities. For the first part of this project, we took our pop-up museum to Wisbech, a town that's about an hour and a half's drive north of the university town of Cambridge, and a town that is, in contrast and shockingly, one of the most deprived towns in the whole of the UK. Educational attainment is very low, unemployment rates are very high, and few people, if anyone, have heard of the Fitzwilliam Museum. Another crucial part of this work has been the element of surprise. Our venues, therefore, have included places like this pub, a supermarket, a shopping centre, and the marketplace in the middle of Wisbech. We've also visited community centres and a food bank run by the local church, where they provide free food to those in need. With us, we took a wooden face from a coffin and a hand from another coffin, replica tools, and a one-to-one replica of a coffin possibly made for a dog, which people could actually take apart and reassemble. There was an opportunity also to make and use your own paintbrush using ancient Egyptian techniques. We had with us also an iPad showing films of woodworking and painting techniques, plus copies of a brilliant book by Dawson called How to Make an Egyptian Coffin, which we gave to people who were particularly interested. After Wisbech, we decided we would take our pop-up museum to Egypt as part of our peer-to-peer training programme at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. After some talks about how to turn collections-based research into accessible outreach work, we helped our colleagues to set up and run pop-up museum events, firstly at the museum itself, which you can see here and here. As in the UK, we had hands-on activities that people could experience, digital information on an iPad, a replica of part of a coffin actually rather than a real artefact from a museum, and copies of How to Make an Egyptian Coffin translated into Arabic. Our next stop after the museum was a furniture shop in Mardi. Now, our Egyptian colleagues had never done any outreach work previously, but they embraced the concept absolutely with enthusiasm and were very keen to take this work further. So after the workshop in Alexandria, and thanks to an ICOM-UK British Council grant, and with the extraordinary assistance of Sara, we were able to assist them in doing a series of pop-up museum sessions in Damietta, a town in the Nile Delta that is an important centre of woodworking in Egypt today. but which has limited cultural access. Our first stop was a furniture factory, and I want to acknowledge the amazing support of its owner, Amr Orenza, who facilitated so much of our visit. There, the designers, production staff and carpenters literally flocked to try out the replicas and compare their own practice with that of the ancient Egyptian craftsmen. The next day, we went to the public library. And the following day, we set up at a sports club and were visited by several hundred children, parents, grandparents, and quite a few local furniture design students. 5 hours later, we had run out of materials and energy, but not out of excited visitors. The most striking comments we received were that people are familiar with objects from Egyptian history, but had no idea about how they'd been made and how seeing and trying out the ancient tools and materials had brought the ancient Egyptians closer to them. For the Fitzwilliam, all these events have further broadened the impact of our coffins research and helped us also to refine the ways that we talk about it. The Egyptian press reported on our activities in the Alexandria workshop and also the visit to the furniture factory in Damietta. And in Cambridge, we received an award from the Vice-Chancellor for research impact and engagement. But more important than this, we have been blessed in having the chance to share our knowledge and learn from visitors to our pop-up museums of their own experience. For our curatorial and conservation colleagues from Cairo, we saw them gaining in confidence in their own ability to present both professional training and public outreach. And we watched them adapting and developing their techniques as they used them. Most important of all, they experienced the appetite of their colleagues and the public to engage with the work and the research that they carried out. And this is invaluable to us all. Thank you. I think you might be muted, Steph.
Thank you for that. I said, wow, this is a very, very comprehensive project, and it's great that you've managed just to, tell us in short. I'm sure there's much more to tell about the different aspects. And if I may, just focus on a few elements of the project that that kind of fascinated me in particular. One of the questions is, about the research maybe. What I really like is the interdisciplinary nature of it. But I know from experience actually that can also be very, very hard actually to bring experts together with different methodologies, different kind of language, work across conservators and scientists. That can sometimes be really challenging. So can you say a bit more about it, and maybe Julie as well?
I would just say to start with that yes, it can be difficult getting people together, but when you do get everybody together in the same room, it is amazing. It really is. It feels like, I think the word is cooking with gas. We just, everything works together. You can actually look at particular features from your own expertise and say, I can see this, and then someone else will say, well, that's because of something else that you didn't know about, and the whole thing binds together in such an enormously productive way that the sum of the parts is so much greater than all the individual elements. It's absolutely extraordinary. And one of my favorite things, we have regular things that we call coffins and coffee, where we sit down together and we just all talk about what we've discovered in the last few months, and it's rich. That's the best way I can describe it. Maybe Julie can say more, and Melanie could say something too, but anyway, certainly Julie.
Sorry, to unmute. Yes, I think two things really. One is that we actually have quite a good tradition, I think, in the Fitzwilliam Museum of actually our conservators and curators and scientists working very closely together rather than in sort of individual silos. So certainly as a conservator, I've always felt that this is something, you know, that I've had a very rounded view of the material on which I've been working. And I should also say actually that our exhibition in 2016 was co-curated by Helen and me, which, you know, having a conservator as a co-curator of an exhibition is also, you know, quite an innovative thing to do in many ways. But the other thing about bringing in other people, like the consultant radiologists and so on, and some of the imaging experts from Cambridge's medical imaging group who helped us with some of the reconstruction from the CT, is that they were absolutely thrilled to bring their expertise to this. And I think just again, by explaining to them as clearly as we could what we were trying to achieve and the way in which we were trying to achieve it, and demystify things and bring things back to a very sort of basic point. I mean, make that connection with the everyday. Just woodworking, everybody knows, you know, a little bit about woodworking, etc. But how this contributes to the story, and then some of these amazing technologies that we can now bring in to help us expose that and show it properly and explain it. It gives it a whole other dimension. And so certainly from all the colleagues, I think, from the scientist working on proteins who helped us from Northumbria University looking at some of the glues, which he was a forensic scientist, knew nothing about Egyptian material at all, to indeed everybody within the hospital setting who supported us with the work with the CT. It's just been a really rich experience, I think, for us, and changed the way we look at things as well, forever, I hope.
I mean, I remember from personal experience actually that the way that how the coffins are made, with lots of indeed bits of material, bits of wood, and just being pulled together, and once, you know, they're painted over, plastered over, they look, you know, fabulous. But actually what's underneath is kind of a patchwork of, you know, bits and bobs in a sense. And that's, I think what I really liked was also your experimental archaeological kind of approach of, you know, bringing in the woodworkers and that kind of expertise about, you know, how things are made. Would make a great episode of that TV program, actually.
Can I say about that though as well, that I think actually, you know, this was the amazing thing working with the academics and the Egyptologists who are possibly just particularly interested in the texts or the iconography. And when you actually stand somebody in front of a very elaborate coffin and you have to say, well, think about what it actually means to paint the interior of this, just from a practical point of view, how you get yourself into that corner, what you have to think about in terms of your materials and so on. It just changes the relationship of everything really, and how you think about what has been achieved and the methods by which it's been achieved. And, you know, you start to understand from whichever angle you're coming at, I think, the challenges that people faced with their materials and how that influenced everything. It changes the Egyptology, you know, not just the technology.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Can I also, for time's sake, maybe move to the outreach aspect of the project? I think we've lost Sara from the Zoom call, but maybe Melanie, you can. I was really curious because, I mean, is it something that the Fitzwilliam normally does, like go out to deprived communities in England with pop-up museums? Can you tell a bit about how that went and how that came about?
Sure. I think outreach is something the Fitzwilliam Museum has been doing for a very long time, so it's not new in that respect. But bringing real objects from the collection and bringing the actual experts into the heart of communities is a real point of difference. Typically, you find education officers doing that, so they're more intermediaries between us as the academics doing the research and then the audiences. But here it's firsthand, so we have a lot more insights that we can contribute to that. I guess from my perspective, having worked on an exhibition in Australia where we're trying to engage Muslim communities with our research, and they were an underrepresented audience from our museum. You know, us going out to them was a really good way of trying to bridge that gap. And so we applied that same concept with the Wisbech community initially, and it's now become really successful in Egypt as well.
So can you talk very briefly about you know, why Wisbech, besides that it's, you know, it's a place that could use, you know, some positive inputs, I think, by the way it was described. But can you say, like, why Wisbech, and do you foresee that you can actually continue that relationship with that particular community in years to come?
Sure. So the concept of the pop-up can go anywhere, but we chose Wisbech because it is within Cambridgeshire, and it's just interesting that it's not that far away from Cambridge, yet it's so different in terms of its demographic, its education levels. People don't know very much about the Fitzwilliam, and we did already have an underlying partnership between the museum and the Wisbech Museum there. So we wanted to build upon that. Okay. There's definitely potential to take this to other culturally deprived parts of Britain and elsewhere, as I've shown in Egypt. But I think it's been really successful so far, and we've also tried to bring the Wisbech community into the Fitzwilliam Museum as well. So we've had a bus trip that we've organised with their community centre, the Osmini Community Centre, and we piloted that on one occasion, and we are planning to do more work with them down the track.
Okay, brilliant. And maybe Sara, just if I may ask you, you know, I think one of the exchange of expertise that has been taking place between Cambridge and Egypt, I think that's a great example. Can you, from your end, describe maybe very briefly what your challenges were in I don't know, did you have to work hard to make people warm for this collaboration, or was it easy?
Well, people are pretty much ready to, you know, to receive more information. They're very eager. It's just the fact that the model of having a pop-up museum isn't really something common here, and we do lack community engagement projects here as well between museums and the people. So it was very inspiring for the people who are seeing or attending these events, and also for the curators, because now they can see how they can do it, and that it's not that difficult. It's not that it's not impossible. I mean, there are difficulties, like, for example,
You're breaking.
We had difficulties, for example, with the security sometimes to organize a public event, like to pop up anywhere. But at the same time, they knew that if they wanted to, it would go. So it was actually very, very well received. And things are getting better. So people, museum, they are now more collaborative, more, you know,
so you're breaking up. So Sara, thank you. You're breaking up a bit. So it's so there were small bits missing, but I think your message is very clear, and I think this is a great aspect of this particular project. Can I ask maybe one last general question, because, you know, we promised we would do this in about half an hour, and we're getting there. This is a very, as I said, comprehensive project. So I was wondering a bit about the resource necessary to do it, both in terms of people as well as in terms of money. And how did you go about that, Helen, just to bring that all together?
We've been very lucky. We have been very, funders have been very generous. I think people recognise that this is important work that needs to be done. We had an Arts and Humanity Impact Fund from the University of Cambridge initially when we started in Wisbech, and then we got a government Global Challenges Research Fund allocation of money, which allowed us to go to Egypt. And it's really through, it does absolutely, as you say, require good funding, and it's really essential that that funding is clearly allocated for particular purposes. For example, we there are things we cannot do, so we can't pay people in Egypt directly to do various things. We have to have establish contracts in particular ways. So it's very tied to how you can do it. But as you say, the resourcing of this is extremely important that it's done properly, because it's very time consuming. You can't do this in a hurry. It needs a lot of groundwork being done, relationships being formed with organisations. Somebody like Sara on the ground is, I can't say how important she is to what we achieve. And we have another colleague, Noor Badr, who we work with very closely as well, who is a conservator at the Grand Egyptian Museum and has good links to conservation in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And he's facilitated a lot of the sort of more academic side of it as well. And so the two of them are our kind of ground base, if you like, in Egypt, and are fundamental to allowing us to do that particular work. One aspect I would like to just highlight that we haven't actually covered is just the fact that it's not just about us. It's not a one-way traffic. It's not just us speaking to people. We hear what they're saying to us. They give us their insights into what they're seeing on these objects that we're showing them. And that enriches our understanding even more. And it's absolutely crucial to the work that we're doing.
No, that's a very fair point, of course. Yes. So I think we need about to wrap up, and I got a bit of a mean question maybe for you as a final. As you know, there's 3 candidates for the UMAC Award 2020. You have some very serious competition from Manchester and Tartu in Estonia. So in one sentence, could you tell us why you should win the UMAC Award 2020?
I would love if we could win it, particularly for our colleagues in Egypt, because I think they would feel absolutely thrilled to know, firstly, that the work they've been undertaking is recognised as important. And I hope that it would then be able to be used for them as impetus to really take this project forward in Egypt for themselves. It would give them that confidence to know that this is really genuinely important, and that their superiors also see that importance too and would support them in doing this work. So that for me is the most important thing about this.
Okay, that's a very good answer. So thank you very much. This is the, Marta's coming back, I see. This is the first out of 3. So next week, Monday, 10 a.m., so slightly earlier, because to be presented by the chair of the UMAC Award Committee, Akiko Fukuno. She will interview our colleagues from Manchester, who will be speaking about their repatriation project that they've done with Australia. Any famous last words, Marta?
No, just that it was such an exciting, vibrant conversation and presentation, because the project is so good, such good quality. It really fits our standards of the UMAC Award. And in fact, the quality of the projects is growing every year. And so we're delighted to have you. Thank you so much. And
thank you very much for nominating us. We're thrilled.
Yeah, and good luck.
Thanks.
Yes. The 28th of September is the big day.
28th of September.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.